Oh, that part of the machine's working. Good for it. Good. All right. So now I'm going to share screen. Let's see if we can find what we want here. There we are. There, Joseph. And as I told you before, I've provided you the spelling of Joseph in 3 languages because I'm drawing from 3 sources. I'm drawing from the Masoretic text, which is the traditional Hebrew text that has come down to us through the Jewish tradition, and then I'm also citing in the middle. So that's in the Hebrew. The Hebrew word Yosef is on the left, and in the middle you have the same Yosef, but it's in Greek from the Septuagint, because I checked everything with the Septuagint as well, those sources, and then sources from the Quran and the Baha'i writings, which are using the Arabic version of the name. Okay, and so as I did with the others, I posted some articles that are informative and from different perspectives, from a Christian perspective, from a Jewish perspective, from an Islamic perspective. And what I thought this was particularly useful. It's a quotation from the Wikipedia article, a summary of the location of the story of Joseph. So I thought I would, just provide that for you. And whereas when you're doing research and you're reading about the different patriarchs and the different other historical figures that are found in the Bible, when you're doing that in the Quran, you're going to find them in many different places. They don't tend to be just located in one particular chapter. But in the case of Joseph, the whole chapter is devoted to Joseph, the story of Joseph. And it's a long one. It's over 100 verses, which makes it one of the longer chapters of the entire Quran. And it's full of very beautifully written, very eloquent, and also interesting content. And in fact, it was called Ahsan al-Qasas, which means the most beautiful of stories. and this was one of the names of the Qayyum al-Asma of the Bab, is a commentary on Ahsan al-Qasas, and we'll get to that later on. So we're going to begin with takeaways, things that I noticed in the actual text of the story. And there are quite a few for the story of Joseph, because we've come now to the ending of the book of Bereshit, the book of Genesis. And we have now 4 chapters. No, I'm sorry, not 4 chapters. It begins with chapter 37 through 45, which is all about Joseph. And then 46 through 50 is about Joseph and his father, because they are reunited after a period of separation caused by the actions of most of his brothers. I say most of them because one of his brothers was too young to participate in the plot to get rid of Joseph, and the other one who was not part of the group was Reuben. Reuben was really tried to dissuade the others from taking any kind of aggressive or harmful action towards Joseph, and of course they went behind his back. So the takeaways about this character. We have the story that Joseph from the beginning. Actually, I should go back to the previous chapter when we were talking about Isaac. that there is a miraculous element in the birth of Isaac and also in the birth of um, the birth of um, of Joseph and the birth of Jacob as well. So you have three generations: Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph, who have this miraculous element involved in their birth. In the case of Rachel, she was simply barren until such time as it said that God uh, let her get pregnant. Right? It's not. There's not a great deal of discourse about it. There's no angelic visitations to either Rachel um, or to Jacob, but still, there's always this. In the case of all three women, they were barren until there was some kind of an intervention, which is a very interesting parallel to, of course, the New Testament stories. And Joseph was the only son of Rachel. She didn't have any other children, and he was beloved of not only his mother, but also of his father, more than the other sons. And as you know, this is a problem. We've seen that it was a problem with Cain and Abel. It's a problem with Isaac. It's a problem with Jacob, and now it's a problem with Joseph. And there are various aspects to their relationship, reasons for them to have this antipathy towards their brother, these other sons. But what really gets them, apparently, what's the straw that breaks the camel's back is the dreams, is the fact that he interprets dreams, and the dreams that he interprets are putting them in an inferior position to him. And that seems to be the thing that decided them to get rid of him. So he has two dreams in the 37th chapter between verses 5 and 11, in which the way he interprets those dreams is that he will be ruling over his brothers. And then they decide first of all that they're going to kill him. But then Reuben objected to this. And then they decided that instead of killing him, a group of the brothers without Reuben decided, all right, well, we'll sell him. Because there were some Ishmaelites, that means descendants of Ishmael, the son of Abraham with Hagar, who were living in Midian. And these merchants were passing through, and so they saw that an opportunity to make some money and get rid of Joseph without being actually responsible for killing him. But they decided, nevertheless, that they needed to go home with an excuse of why Joseph wasn't with them. So they took his coat of many colors that his father had made for him, and they smeared it with the blood of a goat. Well, his father didn't have very good eyesight, probably, and in any case, he couldn't tell the difference between a goat and a human being when it came to blood. So he thought his son was killed. But Reuben didn't know that this happened. So they kept the story from Reuben because Reuben was the only one who didn't agree that they were just going to get rid of him. So basically, these brothers are very, very jealous and very angry, and they've made a decision. The only solution to this is to get rid of this brother. Now they go back home and they show the coat, Joseph's coat, to Jacob, and Jacob is very, very upset and mourning this because this was his favorite son. And meanwhile, the Ishmaelites sell Joseph to an officer and captain of the guard of Pharaoh named Potiphar. And that's the conclusion of the 37th chapter. Then we're skipping a chapter because the chapter 38 is actually about Tamar and Jacob, and a story of that goes completely off topic, and it's interesting, but it's off topic. So we'll just stick with Joseph. All right. Now, Potiphar's wife finds Joseph to be extremely attractive. Apparently, everybody does. Apparently, he's a really gorgeous guy. And that's specifically mentioned in the text of the Torah. And so she's so attracted to him that she's constantly propositioning him. And then finally, at one point, she thinks she has him cornered, and he escapes, but she grabs his coat or his tunic, whatever he's wearing, and tears it, and he has some of that tunic. And she decides, if you're going to spurn my advances, I'm going to get revenge. So she goes and reports to her husband, he tried to rape me. And he goes to jail. But God intervenes here, because instead of being punished in jail, the warden of the prison apparently has an open mind and sees that Joseph is a very gifted person. And so he puts him in charge of the other prisoners. And then one of the things that he does is they try to, the chief butler and the chief baker are sent to prison because of certain actions that made them displeasing to Pharaoh. And they have dreams. Each of them have a dream. And they don't know how to understand those dreams. So they ask their fellow prisoners, and they say, well, Joseph knows how to interpret dreams. And he does. And he says that basically the chief butler is going to live and the chief baker is going to die. And then it happens exactly as he said it was going to happen. So his interpretation of the dream is obviously accurate, as was also the interpretation of the two dreams that he interpreted to his brothers, that he explained that he is going to be a chief over them and they will serve him. Remember those dreams that they didn't like, and the straw that broke the camel's back. Well, he's got the gift of dream interpretation, obviously, and whatever dream he hears, he's able to interpret. So then, when Pharaoh has a dream, which the magicians and wise men of his court are unable to interpret, at least to his satisfaction, the chief butler, who is now in his good graces again, tells Pharaoh about this interpretation of a dream by Joseph, who's still in prison. And Pharaoh really wants to understand his dream. So he decides, I'm going to take a chance here. I'm going to give Joseph the opportunity to give me an interpretation. Joseph interprets the dream and gives advice about what needs to be done. And basically, the dream, he interprets that there will be 7 years of plenty, where the crops that are harvested will be very bountiful, followed by 7 years of drought, where there won't be any yield. And so, having given the interpretation, Joseph says to Pharaoh, you really need to get somebody who's going to manage this so that when the 7 years of drought come, you have stored up enough grain that you can live on it during those years. And Pharaoh on the spot says, well, you're the one who came up with the idea, so you're in charge. So he puts him in charge of managing the whole agricultural production of the kingdom of Egypt for 7 years, and it's very successful. And so Joseph doesn't just get a temporary job, he's got a permanent job now. And his permanent job is like the Grand Vizier. He's the one who actually runs the kingdom. The Pharaoh is the titular head, he has the ultimate authority, but Joseph is calling the shots on the important things. Now, the 7 years of drought come, and the text actually says that this famine occurs globally. Globally, maybe at that point meant in their region, the globe that they knew about. And so that meant that it was going to affect the land of Canaan and therefore Joseph's family. So Joseph's brothers were sent to Egypt by their father, by Jacob, to acquire provisions, to get food, because the word had gotten around that in Egypt there is food. And so they go to Egypt, and they meet with Joseph, whom they do not recognize, but he recognizes them. And and then there's this back and forth, because he insists that he wants to see the youngest son. He wants to see Benjamin because he remembers Benjamin when he was younger, before he was thrown into the pit. He had a very close relationship with Benjamin and loved him very much. So he's going to insist that they bring Benjamin. And so until they bring him Benjamin, he says, I have to have somebody who's going to be the proxy. He's going to be the hostage. So they leave one of their brothers, Shimon or Simeon, and he becomes the one who is going to take the place of Benjamin until they show up with Benjamin. But then there's this very moving scene where the brothers go back to the land of Canaan with all of these provisions so that everybody's going to be able to eat. And they talk about this very generous prime minister of the Pharaoh who is taking care of them. But unfortunately, I have to bring Benjamin back to he's insisting that he wants to meet Benjamin. And so Judah steps up, mans up, and says, if I don't bring Benjamin back to you, you can kill my sons. That sounds kind of extreme, but it's a very heartfelt way of assuring his father that he means business. He's going to protect Benjamin. Of course he's going to protect him because he doesn't want to sacrifice his sons. And he knows his father doesn't want to kill his sons either. It's just a very strongly worded assurance. Benjamin's in good hands. So they return with Benjamin, and Joseph shows them great hospitality. I mean, they must be really astonished because this head of government of Egypt is treating them so nicely, so exceptionally. But they have no idea it's Joseph. And periodically through the text, it says that Joseph is overcome with emotion, and he goes and finds a spot where nobody will see him and weeps. So you know that it's having a tremendous emotional impact on him, but he's got to keep a straight face. He's got to come across as being the chief, the leader, and certainly not a relation of theirs. And then there's clearly he's trying to find some way for them to leave Benjamin with him when they go back to the land of Canaan. And so they kind of invent this situation where a silver cup goes missing and it's found among Benjamin's belongings. And so therefore, it's going to be necessary for him to stay. Well, right after this event, it seems that the story's gone on long enough and Joseph can't hold back his emotions. And so he reveals his identity to his brothers. He forgives them and he sends them back to the land of Canaan to get his father and his entire household to come to Egypt. Because this drought is going to go on. This famine is going to go on for 7 years. He can't keep shipping grain to land of Canaan. He says, no, bring him here. I'll look after him. I'll look after the whole family. So they do that. They go back to the land of Canaan. They tell them that Joseph is alive and that he's head of government. And Jacob goes with them to Egypt, and he and his son Joseph are reunited. And it's a big emotional scene because of the great love between the father and son. And then in chapter 47, rather, the family of Jacob, all of the brothers and their wives, and probably, I'm pretty sure they brought all of their goats and sheep and so forth with them. They all go to a certain quarter in Egypt called Goshen. And Jacob asks that he be able to go back to his homeland. He wants to die in his homeland. And this is because of his great love for that land that had been given to him and to his progeny. But Jacob dies in Egypt. And so it's Joseph's responsibility to make sure to go with his brothers and bury him in the land that had been given to him. So he goes to Canaan with his brothers to bless them. But before he goes there, Jacob blesses Joseph's sons and says that these 2 sons of yours are now my sons. And this is how we come up with the 12 sons of Jacob, or the 12 sons of Israel. Because I keep using the word Jacob, but actually at this point in the narrative, even though he's referred to as Jacob sometimes, his real name is Israel. He's been renamed. He was renamed in the previous chapters. So Jacob blesses his sons, and because he's dying in Egypt, he directs that he wants to be buried in the same place as his father, his grandfather, and his wife Leah, which is the cave of Machpelah in the land of Canaan. After blessing his sons, he dies. He's mourned for 40 days. And then Joseph and his brothers take his embalmed body to the cave of Machpelah in the land of Canaan, and they bury him. Now that Jacob has died, even though Joseph has been so generous and kind and has expressed such affection for his family, they're afraid. They think without Jacob here, who knows what Joseph's going to do? Maybe he's going to get revenge for the horrible thing we did to him. After all, we did try to kill him. So they're very scared. And so they express this, and Joseph reassures them. And I thought that this would be a beautiful passage to actually read. And when Joseph's brethren saw that their father was dead, they said, Joseph will peradventure hate us and will certainly requite us all the evil which we did unto him. And they sent a messenger unto Joseph, saying, Thy father did command before he died, saying, So shall ye say unto Joseph, Forgive, I pray thee now, the trespass of thy brethren and their sin. For they did unto thee evil, and now we pray thee forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of thy father. And Joseph heard them, and he wept when they spake unto him. And his brethren also went and fell down before his face, and they said, Behold, we be thy servants. And Joseph said unto them, Fear not, for am I in the place of God? But as for you, ye thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring to pass as it is this day, to save much people alive. Now therefore fear ye not, I will nourish you and your little ones. And he comforted them and spake kindly unto them. This whole, when you consider this entire story of Joseph, is a story of the character of this man who is certainly just and wise, but above all, he's forgiving. Above all, he has a soul capable of accepting the wrongdoing of others and giving them another chance. And it's a beautiful thing to come to the conclusion of the book of Bereshit, the first book of the Bible, and find this story of all stories, not a story of atrocities or of conflicts or of jealousies, but a story of forgiveness and love. Now I'm going to before we move on to the extra biblical stories, in other words, the quotations from the writings of the Bab and Bahá'u'lláh, because I didn't have time really to go through the entire surah of Joseph and pick out what I thought were the salient points and fit it into 7 days. Because if I was going to do that for Joseph, I had to do it for the others as well. And there's plenty of material in the Quran. So I'm going to suggest that I give you a few minutes to ask questions or contribute anything you would like about this material that I've just shared with you. And then maybe you know some other stories that I didn't mention, because I didn't cover every single detail for sure. So I'm going to figure out how to unmute you. Actually, I think you can unmute yourselves. I think you just have to push the unmute button, and then you can speak. Lisa.
Yes, I have a question. How'd you know? I actually waited to see if anyone else was going to speak first. Um, so you read my mind. What is the salient point of the passage and this history, this piece of history you just read? I'm going to make you do it. What is your
What
point? What are you
what's the point?
saying?
What's the point of
Yeah.
the story of Joseph, you mean?
What is your point in highlighting this passage of history? One of the things you said
Mm,
at the end is that Joseph had the capacity for forgiveness. Well,
mm.
indeed, God says we all have capacity. So, not to nitpick, but I'm just trying to glean from you. What's your point? What is a salient point of this passage, please?
Well, you see, usually Judaism is understood both by Jews and by non-Jews as being preoccupied with law and with judgment and with correct behavior. Uh, Many years ago, when I converted to Judaism, I was told specifically by my teachers, we don't care what you believe. What we care about is what you do. And that is, there are laws and they need to be adhered to. So it was very legally oriented. It was very justice oriented. It was, and not to say that I did eventually have very nice relationships with some Hasidic Jews that introduced me to a whole another angle on everything. But on the for the most part, it was very oriented towards justice and not forgiveness, not mercy. And this story is all about mercy. It's all the whole story of Joseph, because he is uh, he is really kind of an emblematic character in the whole Old Testament for his particular sensitivity to others and his kindness to others and his concern for the betterment of others. Like even how he describes what happened. You did me evil, but your evil resulted in great good being accomplished. You see, it takes a really special human being to have that insight and to live on according to it and to be genuine. Really, he's obviously really genuine, you know. And uh, most personality, there's a lot of vengeance that goes on in the Torah. There's a lot of you did this to me and I'm going to do that to you. Like, for example, we heard that in the story of Isaac. Um, and we heard the story about how the uh, also how the brothers of Dinah, who was apparently either seduced or raped by the son of the king uh, of Shechem, named Hamor, and Shechem is the son name of the son, and the brothers got together and without telling their father, they decided they were going to get vengeance, and they got vengeance by killing all the men in the whole community. So very severe vengeance. You hear those stories quite frequently in the Torah. What is particularly unusual about Joseph is so different. Joseph is not just a wise man, but he's a man with a huge heart. And so it should not be surprising to any of us that the favorite character for Christians in the entire Old Testament is Joseph, because they look at Joseph and they say, Joseph is like Jesus. Jesus also was forgiving of everyone, forgiving of all of the horrible things done to him, and encouraging his followers to do the same. But to me, the greatest example in the Torah of this attitude towards other people is the story of Joseph, because it's not just once in a while he's this way. He's this way always. You think, look at what he does when he when he's sent to live in Potiphar as a slave of Potiphar, and Potiphar's wife is chasing after him all the time. He was a good man. He refused her. And he refused her out of principle. This is wrong. I'm not going to do this. And that shows love and respect for his slave master. And according to modern day thinking, we might think that's very peculiar. Why do you have to be honorable in your treatment of the wife of your slave master? Because we have too much of this judgmental attitude, unfortunately, sort of ingrained into us, rather than forgiveness. But for him, it was not a possibility. He could not do something like that because it was wrong, because it's not showing respect and for another human being, and especially for someone who is in authority, who has a position of authority. You have to respect authority. He always respects authority. He respects the authority of his older brothers. You know, he respected the authority of his father. He respected the authority here of his slave owner, and he will do the same thing with Pharaoh. He's a model employee. When he becomes the prime minister of Egypt, everything goes well because he gives it his all. So I think that there's more character education in the story of Joseph than any other in the entire first book of the Bible. And I think it's one of the greatest stories there is. As the Muslims call it, Asan al-Qasas. It's the greatest of stories. It's the most wonderful stories, because it's that story of the triumph of good over evil. The triumph of good over evil is not to oppose evil with evil. It's to oppose it with good. That is the ultimate objective. And that's what we have Joseph modeling. I think Daniel is unmuted, and so is Peter. Does that mean that both of you have something you want to say?
Yes, the story of Joseph about the grain reminds me of Abdul-Baha storing the grain. And also, there seems to be this theme of 7 years that runs through the stories in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And one other thing, as my understanding, I think I've read it somewhere, that Joseph was noted as being a unifier and peacemaker.
Yes. Yes, he was. He was a peacemaker. Yeah. It's very interesting that you bring up that story, because I think that this is one of the very important stories in Abdul-Baha's life that perhaps we need to pay closer attention to, because there's so many lessons to be learned from looking in detail at what Abdul-Baha did and why the result was what it was. And he actually wrote some tablets and he gave some talks about the importance of storing up resources for a rainy day. prepare in the time of plenty for the time of need, of scarcity. And that is a principle that he not only believed in and espoused, but he practiced it, and it saved, undoubtedly, it saved a lot of people's lives. Apparently, there was a famine in the Holy Land and possibly in that entire region right after the First World War. And it was largely the stored grain that Abdu'l-Baha's Zoroastrian converts who were farming in the Galilee and on the other side of the Galilee in what is now Jordan. It was largely through their actions and the success of their agricultural work that people's lives were protected, and they made it through the famine. They made it through the drought. Daniel, do you have something you'd like to contribute now?
Actually, my headset is the one that mutes, which is why I don't mute on in Zoom, because I can turn off the sound on my headset. So
Oh, I see. Okay, so you just have a different way of controlling. I understand. So if there's anybody who would like to bring up something at this point, or shall we now look at what the Baha'i writings say about Joseph?
Baha'i writings, but is it a metaphor up to the Baha'i writings? Could this story also, other than being literal, is there a metaphorical aspect? Or would we see that moving forward or not? Just factual.
So I think, Lisa, when you speak of metaphorical, what you're pointing to is there takeaway from this story apart from just knowing about the historical event and a character and what they did, right? So you're talking about what can we learn from this? You know, how is this material that can be of benefit to people? Well, for sure, rabbis have been talking on this message in sermons for thousands of years, for sure. Okay. And it turns out that for sure, Christian ministers and priests have been talking about it too. This story, like I said, it's one of the favorite stories because it's a story that has come to it more perfectly expresses the value of forgiveness than any other story. You know, I mean, you can find other stories. There's a story, for example, we looked at yesterday of Esau, who was cheated of his birthright by his brother. But instead of trying to avenge himself when he hasn't seen his brother for 20 years, he goes and he embraces him and they both weep. They're reconciled. And even, his his brother offers him, you can have anything that belongs to me because I know I did wrong and you deserve to get recompense for the wrong I did. And Esau says, no, I have plenty. I don't need anything. And it's clear that that reconciliation also is a genuine one. So, I mean, that's a beautiful story too, but it's not like this one. This one is so detailed and it's on such a different scale because whereas in one case, it's a question of a birthright, which does have significance over the long term. In the case of Joseph, he went from being sold into slavery to being the chief of government, who then puts into place a policy that is going to preserve the lives of the people of the whole region. It's enormous. It's enormous. And it comes all because of his wisdom, his ability, and essentially, Joseph's ability to interpret dreams means he's divinely inspired. Joseph is regarded as a prophet in the Quran and a prophet in the Baha'i writings. And being a prophet is a big deal. It means that you can prophesize, you can also interpret prophecy, and in this case, it means interpret dreams. And we see there were other characters, there were others who could interpret dreams. So the interpretation of dreams means that he's being inspired by what we would call the Holy Spirit. And that inspiration of Joseph influences everything he does. It means that he is a really good manager of other people, as he showed in prison. He was entrusted with running things with the inmates because he was wise. But he wasn't just wise in a sort of worldly way. He was wise in a profound spiritual way. So yes, there's a huge takeaway here, because everything that Joseph does is not only showing us a prophet in action, it's showing us the way human beings should behave.
Thank you.
Yes. So, and that's why the stories have a kind of permanence to them. And I will tell you very personally, ever since I was a little boy, this is the only story in the Old Testament that makes me cry. Every time I read it, because he's doing something that is so unexpected and so essential to life. You think of how many times people have done bad things to you, and if you have somehow arrived at being able to forgive them, a weight goes off of your soul. A joy comes to you that you were not expecting, because you're not holding on to the anger anymore. And what it does for the relationship with that person is that person has been somehow cast away by you because they've done something that really hurts you. And they're accepted back in. And maybe they don't deserve it. Certainly the brothers of Joseph, what did they do to deserve being forgiven? Probably nothing, but Joseph forgave them anyway. And that's the beauty of it, is he knew that the right thing was to forgive. But I think the other thing is that Joseph is in a sense, he's a symbol for all that is beautiful. Baha'u'lláh is called the Blessed Beauty. And the Bab referred to the manifestation as the beauty of God. And what is this beauty he's talking about? It's the same beauty that is talked about of Joseph. And in the mystical poetry that Baha'u'lláh quotes in the 7 valleys and the 4 valleys, for example, Joseph is seen as symbolizing the beauty of God, which is manifest to us through the manifestations. Beauty in all things, beauty in this is one of the things that's so interesting also when you look at it through the prism of beauty, you look at all the laws that are in the Kitab Aqdas. You know where Baha'u'lláh says, do not think that I've given you a mere code of laws. I have unsealed the wine, the wine, the choice wine for you. When you look at things that way, you see that everything that the manifestation is and reveals is beautiful. And both the Bab and Baha'u'lláh stressed how important it was for their followers to be clean and to wear clean clothes and to be sweet smelling, to have a pleasing odor, and to take care of their hair, and basically to look good and smell good, because the outward appearance reflects the inward. The inward and the outward are supposed to be in harmony. And so when you speak of the beauty of the manifestation and the beauty of the teachings of the manifestation, they are about outward and inward beauty. The two things should match up. We have a lot of that in the faith, like our acknowledgement that science and religion are compatible, like our idea that men and women are equal, rather than one being inferior to the other. We could go on and on and on. There's so many examples, and all of those are dimensions of beauty. They're beautiful. What's not beautiful is when you see things that don't fit together, when you see things that are contrasting and clashing with each other and seem to be impossible to reconcile. And like he said here, you meant me. You meant to do me evil, but it turned into good. And we have an expression in English which is probably pretty close to the same idea. And that is when you take lemons and you make lemonade out of them. So I'm going to go on to the references. These are only the translated references, and there are more of them. There are more of them than I'm going to cite. So in the writings of the Bab, the first thing I wanted to quote is, of course, the first book of the Bab that he revealed, starting with the night that he declared. The first verses of this book were revealed to Mullah Hussein. Probably it's the first verses that are seen by Baha'u'lláh that he instantly recognizes as being divine verses, divinely revealed, and says, this is the word of God. And the influence of these verses upon all of the Babis was apparently the same. This is how they became Babis, how they became followers of the Bab, was by reading the Qayyum al-Asma, which is also a commentary on the Surah of Joseph. This is why it's relevant here. And I read this passage from the Qayyum al-Asma, the chapter 21. O peoples of the East and the West, be ye fearful of God concerning the cause of the true Joseph, and barter him not for a paltry price established by yourselves, or for a trifle of your earthly possessions, that ye may in very truth be praised by him as those who are reckoned among the pious who stand nigh unto this gate. Verily God hath deprived of his grace him who martyred Hussein, our forefather, lonely and forsaken as he was upon the land of Taf. Yazid, the son of Muawiyah, out of corrupt desire, bartered away the head of the true Joseph to the fiendish people for a trifling price and a petty sum from his property. Verily, they repudiated God by committing a grievous error. Ere long will God wreak his vengeance upon them at the time of our return, and he hath in very truth prepared for them, and in the world to come, a severe torment. In the fourth Vahid, 18th Bab of the Persian Bayan, it talks about the commentary on the Surah of Joseph, which is the Qayyum al-Asma, and saying that in the first year of this revelation, it had been widely distributed. And you have some wonderful passages from Shoghi Effendi and the Citadel of Faith, and also in there are also some in the God Passes By, which I didn't cite because they're very lengthy. But the Guardian cites the Qayyum al-Asma in a number of contexts when he's encouraging the Baha'is to teach the faith. And it's because it was a beginning, and it was a very, very powerful beginning. And so he wants to remind them of the beginning of the Babi dispensation so that they understand that they're in the same situation themselves. I will leave you to read those quotations on your own. But I wanted to read this passage from Kitab-i-Agan. After the denials and denunciations which they uttered and unto which we have referred, they're speaking of the Jewish people who rejected Jesus and all subsequent manifestations. He says, no independent prophet, according to our scriptures, shall arise after Moses, and Jesus to abolish the law of divine revelation. Nay, he that is to be made manifest must needs fulfill the law. So he's talking not just about Jews, but also Christians. Thereupon, this verse, indicative of all the divine themes and testifying to the truth that the flow of the grace of the All-Merciful can never cease, was revealed. And this is a quote from the Quran. And Joseph came to you aforetime with clear tokens, yet ye ceased not to doubt of the message with which he came to you, until when he died, ye said, God will by no means raise up a messenger after him. Thus God misleadeth him who is the transgressor, the doubter. So the principle that Baha'u'lláh is pointing out to here is that after a manifestation has come and taught us, when he comes, at the time of his coming, he's rejected by virtually everyone. When he's gone, sometime later, when his influence has now garnered many supporters, they say, well, there'll never be another manifestation after him. He's the last one. And Baha'u'lláh is very emphatic that that's never going to happen. He says after himself, there will be another manifestation and an endless succession of manifestations. They are not ever going to come to an end. So some of the specific
Sorry, may I say something in that context?
George, go ahead.
Yeah. In the verse that they quote and they say, ما كان محمد أبا أحد من رجالكم ولكن رسول الله وخاتم النبيين. This is mistranslated. Prophet Muhammad never said that he was a seal of the messengers. He said he's the seal of prophets. And there is a difference between the prophets and the messengers of God. Prophets of God like Daniel, Ezekiel, and so on and so forth. Whereas messengers of God are like Moses, Jesus, Bahá'u'lláh, and Muhammad himself. So in other words, although in some in interpretation, they say prophet and the messenger is the same, but in that verse that Muslims quote, Prophet Muhammad never said that he was the seal of the messengers. He said he was the seal of prophets. Baha'u'lláh was not a prophet. He was a messenger of God.
Yes. So George is referring to the same principle that Muslims, of course, have seized upon this particular verse of the Quran in order to deny that there can be any a manifestation of God after Muhammad. And that is, of course, the major stumbling block of Muslims to this day, to even take a second look at the Baha'i faith, because they say it's not possible. The Quran is the last book from God. There will never be another revelation. It will never happen. We have to build everything, all of our understanding of life and all of our understanding of the life to come, and needs to come from the Quran. And so, but the point being here that Baha'u'lláh says that this has always happened with every messenger of God. The people who 1 minute, please. I have some noisy people at my door. I'll be right back. I'm on the phone. All right. Okay. So come on in and be quiet. Okay. Just a few more minutes. Yeah.
They moved for me.
Yes. So yeah, so I wanted to I'm going to have to go shortly, but I wanted to point out that, the Kitabi Agan is making this point that every single one of the messengers of God have gone through the same thing, that they're rejected during their lifetime, that after their lifetime, their followers say that they're the last prophet, which means that the next time a manifestation appears, then he's going to be rejected too. Because didn't you get the memo? That was the last one. Okay. So there's not going to be another one. And so it keeps going over and over again. So one of the things I wanted to point out is that Joseph is a manifestation of God. And how do we know that? Because it says right here, a quote from Baha'u'lláh. He's saying in the Bihar al-Anwar, this is a collection of hadith. It is recorded in our Qaim, which is the promised one of Shia Islam, the return of the 12th Imam. There shall be 4 signs from 4 prophets: Moses, Jesus, Joseph, and Muhammad. And then he describes what those signs are. In a passage in some answered questions, Abdul Baha explained that the prophets of God are manifestations. So the point being for us to understand that Joseph is seen as a patriarch by Jews, and he's seen as being some sort of a precursor, if you will, to John the Baptist and Jesus, but he's not really recognized by either by Jews or by Christians as being a prophet of God and having the same standing as, let's say, Moses. But in the Baha'i writings, we see that affirmation that he does have that standing, that he is seen as being a manifestation of God. And in both senses, because there's 2 stations for every manifestation. One is the station of unity, that all the manifestations represent one reality. And this is reflected in this beautiful passage from the 7 Valleys of Baha'u'lláh. It's in the Valley of Love. It says, O my brother, until thou enter the Egypt of love, thou shalt never gaze upon the Joseph-like beauty of the friend. And until, like Jacob, thou forsake thine outward eyes, thou shalt never open the eye of thine inward being. And until thou burn with the fire of love, thou shalt never find thyself in true yearning's embrace. And then the station of distinction, which Baha'u'lláh also talks about in the Kitab-i-Iqan. Baha'u'lláh says, methinks at this moment I perceive the musk-scented fragrance of the garment of Ha from the Joseph of Baha. Verily, he seemeth near at hand, though ye may think him far away. This is an allusion to his impending declaration. It's going to be delayed, but at this point when he reveals the four valleys, Baha'u'lláh already knows that he's a manifestation of God. And in many, many other passages of the writings, there is a correlation between Joseph and Baha'u'lláh. So it's a theme that will be explored, has been explored undoubtedly by all sorts of people in the past, in talks, in papers, maybe even in theses and dissertations. Let's hope so. I've had an event that I have to go and attend to that has to do with people putting up a telephone pole and blocking my car. So I need to go and take care of business. It's been a great pleasure to see all of you, to share this with you. And as I said, please, if you would like to participate in a study of this book in more detail, or for that matter, if you'd like to, I'll tell you, there's a cycle. Jews have a cycle of reading the entire Tanakh text of the Torah, all 5 books every year. They begin just about now, right? They begin now, and then they go for the entire year, and the readings called parashah. The readings are segmented for each week, so that at the end of the week, when you have Shabbat, you go to the synagogue and you hear passages recited from the parashah, from the section of the Torah that is being read that week. And you also have citations from various of the other writings that are contained in the Bible, what are called the Ketuvim and the Nevi'im, which are the prophets, are the Nevi'im, and the Ketuvim, the writings, include the Psalms and the Proverbs and Chronicles and Kings and many, many other writings. So there's a yearly cycle. So Jews who are observant to any degree, even Reformed Jews who go to synagogue on a regular basis, are exposed to readings from the 5 books of the Torah every year. It's a cycle. And whether they read outside of it or not, whether they study outside of synagogue, if they go regularly to synagogue, they're going to hear the text chanted. They're going to read the text. And it informs them of the totality of the Pentateuch, which is really the core of their scripture. I think that it would be of a wonderful experience for a group of Baha'is, and for that matter, they'd be welcome to invite any friends they have, whether Jewish, Christian, Muslim, or some other faith, to study all of these books. I think that it would be an extraordinary experience, and I think a very rich one, and it would bring us so much closer to the experience of the Jewish people we know, to actually go through the same cycle that they go through. So I want to say that, you know, if you come to think that this would be a good use of your time, let me know. I'd like to know. This is just a taste. It's not the menu. The menu has many courses. Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you
Any
very
parting
much,
word?
Peter.
Peter,
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very
I know,
much.
Yes.
I know ye must make haste with thy car and thy phone call, but
Yes.
just very quickly, I'm just want to throw it out there. Don't respond. Winters are long in England, but if you were interested in touching on current events with Israel and the divine writings, that would be very great interest to
I'll
me
tell
and
you, Lisa,
hopefully others.
I'm a dual citizen. I'm an American and I'm an Israeli.
So would that be off limits then?
No, it hurts. I just want to tell you, I'm suffering. I'm suffering because I
So
have
much. Yeah.
close friends. I have family. I have people I love so dearly. And I love the whole country. And I love all the people in the country. So it's yes, it's a great suffering for me of what's going on. And of course, there's nothing I can do. I'm except to write to the people I know and to pray and uh and I do keep myself informed. I keep myself informed, although sometimes I ask myself, why do you do that? It's because it's so painful to find
Yeah.
out the details of what's going on. But it's um uh
We
I
just
don't
have to pray.
I
Yeah.
just want to tell you that I don't come out of this as a Jew, as an Israeli, as an American, as a Baha'i. I don't come out of it with anger. I don't come out of it with hatred. I come out of it with profound sadness. And I come out of it knowing that on the other side of this, efforts are going to have to be made on all sides to show more love, more kindness, more understanding.
Okay.
And so I'm being summoned. I'm being
Thank you.
summoned. Lots of love to you all.
God bless you.
And
Allah, friends,
Allah
everybody.
Akbar.
Thank
And
you
I
so much.
Bye.
I hope to see you again someday. Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Israt Hashem.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
And
Bye.
thank you for joining this
Nice to see
class.
you all
I
in person.
loved sharing this with you and hearing from each one of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Allah
Thank
Akbar
you. Allah, Shalom.
and Shalom.
Shalom.